I'm going to make a big start on my first big topic for you today, which is what we call MMT, or modern monetarist theory, which is a bit of a technical one for you. It's a bit of an update on your fiscal versus monetarist policies that you would have picked up from CMAT 1. But this actually has quite a few impacts for mortgage advisors. And that's where I want to go to with you on this topic. So let me just switch over then to the whiteboard. So let's hit that button, go over to our whiteboard here, which is where we tend to present mostly from, don't we, on our training. So modern monetarist theory. Let's get into this. Let's simplify this and tell you what it's all about. Now, I'm going to call it MMT because it's a jolly easier way of spelling it, but it's called modern monetarist theory, which is all about monetarism, but in a modern way. Now, for those of you that know about modern, I'll write it up there for you because it's really cool, isn't it? Modern, obviously up to date, monetarist, theory is what we're talking about. Now, those of you that are familiar with your CMAP and economics and all that kind of stuff know that when it comes to running an economy, a government will choose either a fiscal method of running an economy or a monetarist method. Most tend to use monetarists. So there's the monetarists, they call themselves, or fiscal people, they sometimes call themselves as well. Now, fiscal's kind of at its day, but it's coming back a little bit, really. Monetarism has been dominating since the early 1980s when inflation took off and it needed to be contained. And that's the whole point, because the monetarists are all about shrinking the money supply. You know, you've got this supply of money in the economy, and if you shrink this, it dampens the economy and stops things from blowing over, stops inflation, it contains everything. And when you want to expand it again, you just increase money supply as well. So it's all about raising interest rates and containing inflation, really. That's where it comes from. Now, fiscal's differently. Fiscal policy is where a government will turn the taps on for spending and turn the spending taps off as well. So if they spend government money, they usually have to borrow it, or they usually have to raise taxes or whatever needs to be done. Now, you're comfortable with that, aren't you? So where does modern monetarist theory, or MMT, come in? Well, it's the new kid on the block, as they like to say. And what they believe in, you see, is they believe that they believe in monetarism, first of all, but they believe that interest rates can't really do much more now to control the economy, because interest rates are at rock bottom now, aren't they? 0.1 or something ridiculous like that. They can't go any lower, negative, but that's just not an issue, is it? So what can they do to control the economy? And what they believe in is printing money, as Theresa May called it, the magic money tree. And this modern monetary theory is all about printing money. It's about quantitative easing, as we call it, printing money. The more money you print, it puts more money in the money supply, and that in itself makes the economy boom, jobs fill, and everybody happy. And that's what MMT is. And if you look at the numbers, the Bank of England have been at this for the last decade. I mean, during COVID, the numbers for which I checked out this morning, they printed just under £300 billion, the British government, during COVID. They've printed that money. Well, it's digital printing, of course. It's not like printing press. It's digitally printing. So they've given the Bank of England £300 billion of free money, and Bank of England have just gone along and bought government bonds with that. So the government basically borrowed 300 billion by printing the money to pay for the borrowing. And that's a crazy notion if you think about it. And all that's done is expanded the money supply. It's made it bigger. Now, over the last decade, and I looked at these figures this morning, the UK government, or the Bank of England, have printed, let's get the right figure right, £895 billion. That's almost 1,000 billion. I mean, that's a trillion, isn't it? That's a lot of money. They've printed it, put it into the Bank of England's bank account, effectively. The Bank of England use that to buy government bonds. That's how they do it. So the government issue bonds, as you know, gilts to finance their spending. The Bank of England buys these bonds with printed money, and everyone's a winner. And that's what's been happening, which is great. And that's modern monetarist theory. Print as much money as you want, and then use it to buy stuff, spend things to increase the economy. And if you think about it, the inflation or the recession that we were supposed to have with COVID never really happened. because the government financed us out of it. But there lieth the problem, because there's two problems really. First of all, the government financed us out of the recession that was supposed to happen by giving people money, effectively. Furlough as an example, bounce back loan money, all sorts of spending here, there and everywhere. It's just put the money back in the economy. It's just enhanced the money supply. So what that's done, of course, you can think about it, is it's affected the problem here called inflation. Because the only restraint on modern monetarism, printing money, is inflation. If inflation starts to take off, you've got to stop printing money. And of course, if you increase the money supply by printing money, inflation will start to take off. Because what's happening, if you think about logic, is there's just more money swishing around. There's more money in people's pockets. Coming out of COVID now, businesses and consumers are awash with cash. There's loads of money there and people are spending it. They're spending it on buildings, they're spending it on cars, on holidays, they're going away now they're allowed to, they're going out to restaurants and spending it and spending it and spending it. And that's obviously doing great for the economy. But it's also affecting inflation, because as demand for products and services goes up and the supply of products and services remains fairly stable, that will cause inflation because prices will go up. Demand's high, supply is restricted, prices go up. Inflation's trickling upwards. We've seen it. Now, a lot of people are blaming it on supply side problems. You know, talk about the gas, for example, talk about transportation across the world, tankers, etc. Gas prices have rocketed, haven't they? Builder prices have rocketed because there's a supply problem. We can't ship stuff across the world so quickly now. Hence, there's a problem with supply. Supply being like problematic causes inflation, causes prices going up. And gas has trebled in price because of that, because people have restricted supply. Now, that's only temporary. That's only temporary because they'll fix the supply problems. They will. The government will help in a certain way, but the economies will fix supply problems. But the underlying problem is still there. I don't think it's temporary inflation. Take a look at the numbers. They're edging upwards. I don't think it's temporary, and I'll tell you why. Because people and businesses are awash with cash. We're spending it quite happily at the moment. We've come out of COVID now. Vaccines helped us do that. And the economy is starting to boom quite nicely. There's shortage of staff in certain sectors and industries. There's a shortage of equipment and all sorts of things, which causes prices. As prices start to go up, what happens? People want pay rises. People put their prices up. People want pay rises from their employment. Therefore, of course, salaries go up. And the company that pays those increased salaries then has to increase their prices to pay for it, and that's causing inflation. And it's starting to get a bit of momentum. Anyway, Bank of England stop printing money now because we don't want. And they're thinking now of, guess what? Putting up interest rates. Old Bailey said in November they might put them up, because they will, because as you can appreciate, inflation's starting to rise out of control. The economy's booming far quicker than the government ever thought. So anyway, look at the messages for mortgage advisors. That's the key thing here, isn't it? Mortgage advisors, we lend money on mortgages. Now think about it. Inflation is probably quite good for mortgage advisors. It's probably our friend. Think about it. Inflation erodes debt. It makes debt less of a burden. Of course, a mortgage is a jolly big debt that we encourage people to take out. It might be 100,000, 200,000. If there's inflation over a period of time, that will just erode the value of the debt, which is a good thing. Most people's mortgages from the 80s and 90s have been eroded by inflation. My mum and dad's first mortgage was £8,500 in the mid-80s. Nothing now, if you think about it. Back in the mid-80s, there was a lot of money. Anyway, so inflation kills debt. Inflation has a great effect on assets. Stocks and shares, one example, but property. Properties go up in value because of inflation. And property is one of the best tax-free investments you can have. So, yeah, pretty good stuff, isn't it? So you think about it, it's our friend. But on the other hand, interest rates going upwards are not our friend. I don't think there's anyone's friend. So we look at fixed rate mortgages, maybe to fix people for a period of time. Talk to your customers, let them know what's happening. You're not an economist, but you should have an understanding of how interest rates are moving. Talk to your customers, let them know what's going on. Look at fixed rates. Maybe take a look at a 5-year, maybe a longer term fixed rate. I know the the remortgage cycle gets shrunk a bit for you, but hey, charge a fee just to maintain the client's account every year. There's no big deal there. You can monitor it, keep an eye on them, and keep in touch. There's nothing wrong with that. Other professionals do that as well. But look at 5, maybe plus year fixing, because interest rates will start to rise. Now, whether we blame that on the modern monetarists, the Bank of England printing almost £1 trillion in the last decade, we haven't had inflation to worry about, have we? We are now, and I can see this causing possibly some issues for the economy in a few years' time. We may therefore have to do something about that money supply. We've expanded too much, we've printed money. Now maybe we need to shrink it, higher interest rates, buy back bonds, that sort of thing. And that ultimately may cause recession. So plan for that as well in the next 3 to 4 years, because we didn't have one during COVID. We should have done, but the government put a sticky plaster over it by spending 300 billion and giving it back to us, really. We will have one in 3 or 4 years' time. So plan for that is the key to that. So a little message there on MMT. Hope you found that useful. Well done.